And here we are.
Look how beautiful.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, this is Writing Wednesday, and this is the wonderful author Judith Freeman, author of The Last Embrace.
The Long Embrace.
The Long Embrace, excuse me. The portrait of Raymond Chandler and his wife, a portrait of a marriage. And she's also the author of Red Water and a ton of other wonderful books. And she's a writing chum. And we're going to do a little writing workshop, today, of just writing together. Our friend Dylan Landis is in the kitchen making cappuccinos. And so we're going to write together a method called the Pomodoro Method, which is a timing thing where you put on a timer for 25, you write for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. You write for another 25, you take a break, you write. So it's 2 hours, and then you can repeat for 2 hours. And this is the kind of thing writers do. We get together and we try to get something done. So this is a secret location. This is Dylan's launch pad, so we are lucky to be here. And you want to sit down and talk a little bit?
Yeah.
Dylan's going to finish the coffee, and it'll be, this is kind of a treat for me. As you know, I'm usually in my office with all the books, but you've got to take a look at this sweet place. I'm going to turn this around. So, how nice to have this little patio to work on. And then she also has a dining room table to work on. And so we're going to try this Pomodoro method and see how it works.
Have you ever done this before? Pomodoro?
I have not. I have not done the Pomodoro method, but I do, and most people know that I do keep a timer on my phone, on my desk, and just as a way of cutting the procrastination, I put it for 15 minutes. I do a round of 15 minutes reading, writing, maybe doing journal, and maybe cleaning my office, and then I go back for 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. But if writing takes off, then everything else can go screw, I don't care about that. Have you ever done this before?
Never.
Wow. So Judith is currently working on a new project, so it's the beautiful new stages of a writing project.
Yeah, beautiful and terrifying.
Is it terrifying?
Well, for me, it's like every beginning is hard, but I'm past the beginning. But every book is hard, even when you're in the flow and it feels so good and it's taking off and you look forward to writing every morning and there are those days where you say, wow, is this story working? Even after 7 or 8 books.
Wow.
You think, well, I feel good. I feel this is pretty good. It's flowing, but then there are days when you think, I have no idea. Is anyone going to want to read this book?
And this is after 8 books. So whatever people are feeling about their books, this is the way it is. It's not, you're not doing anything different than somebody who has written 8 books here. I got an interesting question from, I think we can do it this way. We can sit side by side.
Okay.
And then you can see us both. I got an interesting question from a writer asking me what I thought about whether I thought she was working on a short story, a novella, or a novel. She said that the pace seemed like a short story pace, but the arc of the story seemed like a novel arc. And she asked me what I thought she was writing. Now, of course, based on nothing but that. My take had been that to write the short story, like to take a piece of that arc and write that, and then see what kind of a charge it had. Because you can put a novel together like pop beads. that you can write pieces of it that can stand alone, and then you can also pop them together, not necessarily chronologically, but thematically or associationally. You can go backwards and forwards. What kind of advice would you give for a question like that? Because I know what it is. You start writing and you just, you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, Eudora Welty, who mostly was famous for her short stories, made her reputation on short stories. She said every once in a while she would start a short story, and then suddenly she would get this horrible sinking feeling, realizing it was going to be a novel, and she was in it for the long haul. It's been a long time since I've written short stories. My first book was short stories, and I want to go back now after this novel to short stories. But I think you're right that that pieces can be put together, and that a novel is a huge animal, and it usually, when I work on a novel, it flows forward kind of the way it's eventually published. But I have many times gone back and written a new piece. It doesn't start where I thought it did. A new piece for the beginning. So I would say write it as a short story, maybe, or as a piece of what might be connected stories that would make a novel.
Right, and I try very hard not to write a novel, because they're very hard. They take a long time, so it's like you don't want a disastrous marriage, you want something that's going to stick. And so the short story is like dating, you can date and see how it is. And then when you write the novel, then So this is Dylan Landis, who is the wonderful author of the novel Rainy Royal and a collection of short stories. Let me get it right.
Normal people
don't live like this. And Rainy Royal is a what did it start as a novel in stories?
No, it started as stories that were quite separate, but linked.
Okay, I'm going to switch so you can see Dylan. She made these wonderful cappuccinos too. So this is Dylan Landis, who's our host today. So it was discrete stories, separate stories.
They were discrete stories that were all about this family, mostly about the daughter, Rainy Royal, in 1970s Greenwich Village, and the environment in the townhouse that they lived in, which was extremely creative and a little overcrowded with people coming and going who were all musically involved.
Right. It's sort of the Royal Tenenbaums, but in a serious way.
A very serious way, and a very over sexualized way that this girl had to grow up in the context of and fend off and rebel against.
And if you ever wonder why, the mean girl who was so beautiful but just picked on everybody, it's like, if she's so beautiful, why does she have to be so mean? If you're interested in that phenomenon, I mean, Rainy Royal is a great example of that. So when I was asking Judith, I had somebody write to me and ask me, she was writing something and she didn't know if it was going to be a short story, a novella, or a novel, because she said it was paced like a short story, but the arc was more of a novel type. And my recommendation, of course, is always write the short story, because you can jump out of the plane if you need to.
Right. I agree with that. And I think it may lead to another story and then to another, and you may be able to string them together. And you can unweave parts and reweave them into what ends up being a novel.
Right.
You may find that story in the center of what becomes a novel, or at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that. My second book, Paint It Black, started off as a short story, which was really the climax of the novel, and I had to work the novel backwards and then forwards from that moment. Yeah. But if I had just tried to write the story, I would have just been meandering. which is a nightmare. That's when you just don't know what you should be doing.
Oh, God, I have done that.
So I was telling about the Pomodoro Method, and how did you come across that?
A writer named Catherine Voss in New York, who's written a number of novels, has turned me onto that. She always writes on a timer, and she brought one over to my house. But there's an Italian named Francesco Cirillo, I think, who created this method. You can use it for cleaning out your drawers. You can use it for writing. A lot of writers do. And it's called the Pomodoro Method because his timer was shaped like a kitchen tomato timer that you wind up. Catherine uses a cow timer. And they have this crazy rattle at the end that's kind of shrill, but and you can hear it tick. But it's kind of cool. But you write for 25 minutes, and then you stop. You could be in the middle of a word. You've got to stop. And then you have a 5-minute break. And the 25 minutes goes by so fast. And that timer goes off, and you're like, no, I'm not stopping, but you have to. And then your 5-minute break, you can talk to whoever you're writing with or go make coffee. And then when you come back, you're just dying to write again. And that next 25 minutes goes by so fast. So you do 4 of those, and that's a Pomodoro.
And what do you find that break does for you? Forcing you to stop.
It's a little tiny recharge. And it also lets you do necessary things like hydrate or go, use the bathroom or respond to a very pressing email. But it also leaves you just dying to get back to work, which is very important. Mm-hmm. It's not as if you just write for half an hour and keep writing. There's no point in there where you're thinking, God, I'm dying to write the next sentence.
Right.
You just keep going. And interruptions.
Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't mean to pause it. I meant to switch it. There we go. Judith, do you have any procrastination problems? Have you ever done this kind of...
No, I have never done this.
Uh-huh.
One other time I've written with Dylan and 2 other women, but just once, and it was a very nice feeling because, in a way, writing is so lonely. It's lonely, yes. And you get a chance to do your work, but you have this sense of camaraderie, which I really liked. But generally speaking, I work at home. I've never had an office. I work at a desk in my bedroom next to the bed. I like being at home because I can go out and water the garden or make tea, or never wanted to be away from home. And once I get an idea going, I don't have procrastination problems. I sometimes take, a lot of time between books to recharge. But once I get an idea and it takes off and I start writing, I have no problem going to work at 9 or 9:30 and working until about 1:30 or 2. 4 hours, I'm done. I've always worked alone. Mm-hmm. So this is really interesting. I brought my notes and my computer. I'm always working from notes. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited. I know what I want to do today. I know how I want to go forward, where I am. And it seems like something I'd like to not do maybe all the time, but once every week or two. Yeah.
Yeah, I am really excited about doing this. I am working on edits of the second book of Marina, The Revolution of Marina Makarova, which I think I have a title. We'll see how that goes. And but a lot of stuff is going on in my life. My house is really it's an explosion in a mattress factory. I mean, what a mess. And there's a lot of pressing stuff going on. So I was very happy to take a break to write. I mean, to get out of my house, do a timed writing, so it kind of, I know what the piece I need to edit next is. And I'm just so glad to have brought everything with me and really I will be writing for the next 2 or 4 hours with you guys, rather than I will start writing and then, all of my other concerns start coming up. This way, they'll come up, but I won't be moved away from my work with them. So I love a timer. The kitchen timer is a great saver. But writers, it's funny how when you work at home, it's great for concentration if your concentration is with you at the moment. But boy, when you start being restless and you're at home, there's just too much that you can be doing. You can be repotting the succulents. I have a writer friend who gets trapped by her succulents, or walking the dog, or, playing with your kids, or whatever.
So what has the timer done for you?
Well, what the timer does when I'm at home is it concentrates your time. The theory is that you get the most work done just before you have to quit for the day. On a Friday, if you're working in an office, you just work really intensely so you can get out of there. And so the idea is to work more intensely rather than for longer periods of time.
And do you set an intention, as the Pomodoro Method needs you to do, what you're going to get done beforehand?
No, because I'm in these enormous projects.
Okay.
And there's one school of thought that was Mark Twain, where he will stop in the middle of a scene. He would stop so that he would be excited to get back to work the next day, as opposed to that feeling of finishing something. So I thought
think that was Hemingway's advice.
I remember Hemingway saying that.
Hemingway,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
credit where credit's due.
Well, probably more than one people have said that, because it just makes so much sense that you stop at a place that you feel excited to pick it up again, rather than hitting a wall and stopping because you can't go any further.
Right.
And the same wall might be there the next day.
Or working to exhaustion,
Right.
or working till you finish that
Right.
section, and then you have the next section. Although what I do is I go back and clean up what I wrote the day before as a way of re-entering.
I wonder if every writer doesn't do that now, especially because the computer lends itself to that.
Right. Oh, writing is so different between the computer age and the typewriter age. I remember when you write with a typewriter, you do whatever you can do not to have to retype the manuscript. Everything, you physically you cut and paint and tape, and so the pages are all uneven length. As you tape in pieces.
But I actually wrote The Long Embrace in longhand.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh my God!
And I also wrote Red Water in longhand. And then I would write a chapter or two in both books in longhand, because I felt this extraordinary flow of the ink on the paper going forward, and the mind-hand connected without the machine. Anyway, those books just lent themselves to it. But my
They did with Red Water also because it was written in the 1880s, and there were letters and diaries, and the physical writing of it just makes then you're participating in their process.
In a way, but that didn't hold true at all for Chandler.
Right.
I just found a different flow, and my reward was, if I wrote a few chapters, I would then go to the computer and put them in and print them out so I could see this stack of a book accumulating, and I would try and not change too much when I put it into the computer. That was the point at which I didn't want to futz with it a lot, but I wrote it in spiral notebooks. And the interesting thing was, I still went back every morning and reread the page or 2 or 3 or 4 I'd done the day before. But I often would change something and put an arrow to the left-hand page. And then the next day I would go back and look at it again and think, no, don't change that. first really is sometimes best. The thing about a computer is that you will never have first, because we continue to change every morning, every day. So I think the way that books have been written for hundreds of years in longhand, in a much shorter period on a typewriter, produced a certain kind of prose. And computers are producing a different, slightly different. And I've had an editor in New York tell me when he really began to get manuscripts written on computers that he could feel and sense the difference.
Wow. Now, do you ever write you write always on the computer?
I do now.
Uh-huh.
But I have done longhand. I have hand issues.
Right.
And it's harder to hold a pen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's hard to do the typing, but it's easier in the long run to do typing than to hold a pen for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and I feel that I think through my hands. I can't dictate.
Uh-huh.
It just, I can't think through my mouth.
Yeah, somebody asked me, do you feel that there will be doing voice? She was interested in doing voice recognition, writing a novel using voice recognition, and I was just thinking about how that novel would be different. I think that it would lend itself to voice novel, like a almost like a monologue. It'll be wonderful, when we're all old and we can't see very well.
Well, it makes me think of Sam Shepard, who died recently, and there was such an interesting piece on him, because when he was sick, and his family and friends set him up with a recorder in the garden, and he dictated his final novel.
I bought it. I'm looking forward to it. Oh my God.
And I'm very curious.
It looks
about
wonderful.
The difference what a difference I think it would make to speak a story and then have your friends help you edit it or cobble it in a certain way, as opposed to write it. So let me know what you think about it.
It would be very hard to edit, I would think. If you're doing it all, you have to keep it in your memory. You have to keep it in your memory to do a voice.
Unless someone reads it back to you.
And then you have to remember what they've said.
I did try hiring someone because it's hard. I'm sibilant. There's a hiss, and it's hard for me to get good results with computer dictation. So I tried hiring someone, and I was reading an early draft, and I was making changes as I talked to her, and she was typing. It was so uncomfortable. I write very freely and very darkly.
Right.
And I didn't know her.
Right.
And I was very self-conscious.
Right.
And it wasn't comfortable.
So I think the people who dictate, like Milton, those were his daughters. Those were intimate family members. And there's a wonderful painting. I think you told me to look for it, or maybe you did. Somebody told me to look for it in the New York Public Library as you go up the stairs. There's a painting of Milton. There's a painting of Milton dictating his Paradise Lost to his daughters. And there is a really, really funny parody of that painting where the daughters are like doing other things because he can't see them, so they're like, they got the headphones on. And I love that.
Yeah,
I find that for me the longhand works best when I'm really stuck, just to have that pen in my hand and let it flow. Something other people do is they turn off the screen, the light on the screen,
Yes, sir.
and they just type blind.
Didn't Dave Eggers do that? Not Dave Eggers. David Foster Wallace. Didn't he do that?
I don't know. He might.
I think I heard
that.
Yeah. That sounds familiar.
Jonathan, one of the Jonathans. Oh, forgive me. That's a terrible thing to say.
Maybe Lethem.
I think it is Lethem. He does something so he can't see the screen or can't.
It's the other Jonathan.
Which one?
The one whose name I can't remember.
The point being, I think it's
the
done.
corrections
Jonathan Franzen. I know that he
Yes.
takes off the internet, isn't he? Or is that
Yes.
Eggers too? That
I
they
think a
have
lot
a
of people do
computer
that.
with no somebody.
That's not-
I want to say it was Franzen who put super glue in the internet in
Yeah.
the port for connection for his to his computer, so that computer would just be a writing computer.
I may be completely wrong about this, but I thought I remembered reading that he wrote the corrections
Yeah.
blindfolded.
Wow.
That may be what I'm trying to get
Could
at.
that
It's a
be-
sensory
Yeah.
Yeah.
thing.
Wow.
Which, of course, if you dictated with good results, you could do. I do know writers who cannot think with their hands. It doesn't come out through their fingers. It has to come out the first time when they're walking. If they're not walking, it ain't happening. So they get first draft thoughts, at the very least, out into their phone,
Pacing.
outside,
Uh-huh.
on their walks. For an hour, 2 hours, and then they come back and they can listen to it, and then they can get what's useful from that,
Wow.
including whole chunks, into the computer and write that day.
Well, because also there's a rhythm to good writing, that each book will have its own rhythm. And I often will, pace and try to get the physical rhythm of the character's voice.
And you must read aloud, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I always read aloud, and I read aloud, and I sometimes make my family act out things, so I have a scene that has a lot of physical action, and I want to know what somebody on a couch with another person, say, would see of the room,
Right.
if that partner is in the way, and I'll make my family members act it out with me, gesture, or have somebody else read your stuff.
Yes.
Used to be in a writers group here in LA where it was actors who were starting to write, and you didn't read your own stuff. An actor would read it for you, and that's a really fascinating exercise because you can hear stuff that's wrong. You can hear where they stumble. It's like, and you're making changes as you go. I mean, that's nice. Somebody said, of course, Sam Shepard was a playwright, so the idea of speaking the writing process would come more naturally. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I have a novelist friend, Michelle Braffman, in Washington, D.C., who read several stories to me of mine from my manuscript over the phone.
Wow.
Because I was just losing my voice reading my manuscript aloud for, the second or third time.
Yeah.
And she took over. It was so nice.
Oh, it's so nice, and you learn so much, so use your friends. Use your friends. They're always curious about your work anyway. So, people would love to participate. So let's see. Do we have any other questions that we haven't gotten to, you guys? Yeah, so this is Dylan Landis and Judith Freeman. And I forgot to say that Judith Freeman's latest book is a memoir called the Latter Days,
Right.
about growing up and how writers are made. And Judith was a Westerner, and she's grew up in a big Mormon family in Utah, and what that was like, and then how that formed her sensibility, which is really what being a writer is. It's not just you sit down, but you express your sensibility on the page. You can't help but do that.
You can't help it.
You can't. So anything, let's see. It shows there is no right way. Judy Garcia says, great to hear writers discuss writing strategies. It shows there is no right way. No, there is not right. And it's just like, man overboard. You look for something that works. That's what I mean when I say the wonderful thing about writing is you're always a beginner. And you're always shaping the tools that you need to write that book. You have to build the tools as well as writing the book.
And scene. It
That
always feels like the mountain. I'm always at the bottom of the mountain
Right,
every time.
right. until you're suddenly, I don't know if you ever feel like you're on top, but you feel like you're suddenly home. It's like, holy mackerel, I finished that scene. I worked on that scene for a month, editing it. And then I thought I would never get it. This total despair, even in the editing process, even after all these years of writing. And then suddenly, there you are, and you have it. So I think that's one of the big differences between being an experienced writer and being a newer writer, is the panic that you'll never do it is leavened by the knowledge that you've somehow done it before.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you've done it, you've been here before, you've done it before, somehow you will get from here to it'll be done and you'll be on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Who wrote that book on writing well?
I don't know.
There's a great quote in it, something like a writer or someone for whom writing is harder than other people.
I think that is like totally true. And not only that, my husband's a writer as well, and he's a big Dorothy Parker fan. He's a comedy writer, and he said, it's that the thing that kills you about being a writer is that the thing you wrote is as beautiful as you could make it, and it's still not what you wanted it to be, and that's what kills you. For a comedy writer, she's so here's one. She's very depressive. When typically do the characters take on their own form and start dictating the story? For me, well, let's start with Judith. When do the characters take over? I gotta switch it this way. There we go.
Well, it's odd because I feel like voice is incredibly important, and I also feel like it's one of my strengths, and I've written a lot of books in the first person. And I think I began to form that sense of character before I even really start the book. And once I've committed to that voice and that character, and I enter the story 4, 5, 10 pages, that person is ready, I think, to take over and lead me and help me move forward. As for the other characters, they're kind of a chorus around her or him, and they won't drive the story as much as that primary voice, that primary character. So I have to say very early on, for me, usually.
How about you, Dylan?
I'm also going with voice. I get it in a slightly different way. I often don't know it before I start. I have to start writing. And I will work on those first 10 pages, oh my God, for so long, I'm embarrassed to tell you, to find the voice. And I have to do the wrong voice for so long, it's painful. When I've got it, it means that I can kind of go down into the basement and I'm not being dictated to by the characters. I'm kind of channeling from my own subconscious what they're likely to do and what they're likely to say, and I'm much more likely to get it right when I finally have that voice down. Zadie Smith once said somewhere that she will spend something like a year or something on the first 50 pages, and then she can write the book in the next pretty quickly.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, usually the character, I get to the end of what I know about the character. That's kind of a panic moment. I hear the voice, and then I get to the end of what I know about the character. And I'm doing my kind of self-hypnosis thing where I go into the beautiful garden and I talk to my characters. And often I'll ask one character about another character. Like I'll ask her father about the girl or about himself, or I'll talk directly to the character and say, why am I not getting you? What do I not get about you? How do you really feel about this? And have the character talk to me, and that's really helpful. Somebody said when they start disapproving of what you wrote is when the characters take over. That is very good. I find sometimes you have to change the character, even if you see them clearly. You have to change the character to orchestrate them with the rest of the narrative. Like I found with Josie in Painted Black, I had a certain picture of her as being a very fragile person. But in the situation where she is dealing with her dead boyfriend and his very angry mother, who is a powerful figure, I had to strengthen the character because as a very fragile character, she just crushes too easily. And my story, she wouldn't have hung in with the story.
Right.
Yeah, so character orchestration has something to do with this question.
I also don't think I can move forward if I don't have compassion for every character, even if it's one character's point of view who's taking me through the story. I can't just have another character acting badly if I don't have real compassion for that character and get why.
Yeah, I think nobody's a villain to themselves. Everybody has a reason. Everybody is the star of their own movie. So when you're writing villains or antagonists, let's say, when you're writing antagonists, you have to, say, okay, from that person's point of view, all of their cruelty or, misbehavior is totally justified. And when you see that, you build a more complex character. It's one of the things that I like best, is to be writing a character who is kind of a nasty person. Right. I mean, your Rainey Royal is no angel.
No.
Because people ask you, are you Rainey, What do you say to them?
I started out not being Rainey at all.
Morning.
And then we sort of started to fuse in places. She became kind of an alter ego for me. She was part of an email address I used for a long time. I mean, I've been writing Rainey for years. I realized how deeply I loved her. It's a little hard for me to think that she might not be real. So I'm partly Rainey, but that took a while to happen and a while for me to understand why. I'm partly Rainey, how much of myself I put into her.
Well, that's why she lives.
But she didn't start out that way. And I've never been a bully. But I'm sure I could be when I think about it.
Well, we could be everything. That's why we could be writers.
Well, I also think that as a reader and for readers, that we really appreciate characters with imperfections because it makes us more compassionate for our own imperfections.
Right. And it's so funny because a lot of people have these, get into these wrangles with their editors, that the editors want you to make, not me, or these, but certain people are told that their characters are not likable. Their protagonists are not likable. Now, what do you think of that idea about the fiction of the likable character?
Well, it just doesn't really have a place in my cosmos because what I'm really looking for is nuance and complexity about the human condition. And sometimes I imagine I'm likable, sometimes I really know I'm not. And all I think we have to do is make them real and believable, not likable, but flawed human beings who are doing what we're all doing, which is really trying to manage our lives, with this incredible set of demands and circumstances that everybody feels like. Sometimes we're good, sometimes we're not so good.
Right. And then how do we what are we going to learn from a character who's just likable? I mean, that's nice, but the chiaroscuro, the shadow, is what pops the third dimension.
Yeah,
So,
I think of Patricia Highsmith and Ripley.
uh-huh.
I mean, he's really not likable.
No.
But somehow we like those
You can't
books.
look away,
You cannot
Yeah.
which
look
is
away.
much more interesting than likable. You can get likable from your friends. And
Yeah,
in fact, how nice do you want your friends? Don't you want them to be interesting, too?
I don't know. I like my friends to be likable,
But also
but this
interesting,
is
I think,
real
too.
life. You know, in fiction, you don't want your character to run to the therapist and get straightened out. You want to see what happens when pressure goes on to a person who has to deal directly with the phenomenon. I mean, there are very few books that I can think of where somebody is running to their therapist that I really want to read. I can think of Mary Rakow's The Memory Room, you know, somebody dealing with, you know, the aftermath of childhood abuse. That it's it's almost a love story with that therapist. But there aren't many. You know, usually it's like people who run to somebody to solve their problems are not the most interesting people in fiction.
Not in fiction, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people who aren't honest about their flaws in real life. You need flaws. You need someone facing a conflict. And I don't think it's that hard in fiction to have some avenue of compassion toward a character.
Right.
One of the scenes I'm coming up to is the two very old friends who are now, you know, in their 60s, are having a conversation about shame. And what have they done in their lives that has seemed to them terribly shameful? Mm-hmm. And that's not a thing we usually would reveal to each other. And she tells her friend something that she's done that in a way is so bad that I've been trying to understand it. And is she are you really bad if you do something like this? And I don't think so. But it'll be interesting to write the scene. Like, what have we done that's caused us to feel so shamed?
Right.
And what would it mean to reveal that? How would we feel about a character if we did that?
Well, that's what you want fiction for, you know, because in life that usually doesn't happen. You know, so fiction is sort of the asbestos gloves that you can try things on like that.
Oh, and there's a story in Dylan's collection of two girls doing something horrible to a couple in their apartment. But it is mesmerizing. It is so incredible. And you think these teenage girls are so wicked. But as you said, you can't stop reading. And it makes the most compelling, complex character.
Yeah, and you also know why.
Yeah.
You know why they are doing it. You know, understand the pressures on them, and why they feel they need to do this. So it's more if you were God, how you would pity the human being, you know, who was caught between these different needs and impulses. It's so good. So I think we've had a nice chat here, and we're going to get on to our writing, and I hope you guys do too. And thank you for joining us for Writing Wednesday. So this is Judith Freeman. There she is, and Dylan Landis. And there she is. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Take it easy and good writing. Bye.